Welcome to the Got Academy podcast. Hi everybody, hello Rutger.
Hey man.
Hey, welcome everybody to another The Expanse Season 4 review. We want to talk The Expanse and science. Obviously, in every sci-fi story, and specifically in The Expanse, there's a lot of science. And in Season 4, there were a lot of interesting scientific plot lines. You're a scientist, you're an evolutionary biologist. We want to start off talking about diversification.
Right.
In the universe.
In the universe.
Yes. Of the Expanse and in our known universe and world.
Yeah.
There is a planet on the other side of the ring. A group of Belter refugees has claimed it as their home.
So you mentioned diversification, and I suppose most people then think about diversification in the market, right? So that you have, different industries within the same national economy. But here we're talking about biological diversification, which is the process where more and more species evolve in some place.
They want to explore new worlds. We should let them.
When Columbus arrived, at least he knew what was waving at him was human.
So we are the species that are diversifying.
Yeah. Well, we're obviously one of the species, so of course we bring things with us, like in our gut microbiome and so on, and probably we're going to grow crops on those new planets. So we're going to bring other life forms as well.
Okay, so how do you see that play out in Season 4?
Well, we're just kind of only at the beginning of this, but there's really opportunity for this. So if indeed the people in the Expanse go and colonize all these different planets and stay there out of contact potentially for a long time, maybe even when the portals close and they're just stuck there, then they're all going to become very different. And this is something that happens with life on Earth as well. I guess the analogy is like something like islands appearing in the ocean. So, for example, the islands of Hawaii, right? Like the Pacific tectonic plate moves over this kind of hotspot where periodically a volcano erupts and breaches the surface of the ocean, and then there's Maui or Oahu or whatever, and then there's a lot of opportunity there because there's like barren land, but it is very fertile because it's volcanic, and so then whoever arrives there first, also as plants, like seeds maybe that wash ashore, they all of a sudden have a lot of different opportunities there. So you could be sort of on the beach, you could be up the slope of the volcano, or higher up in different altitudinal zones. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and what you then actually see happen is that in a very short time, a lot of different species, what is called radiate. So these lineages go in different directions, and very quickly they become different in what they look like as well, because they're adapted to different zones on the island.
So maybe this is why the slugs are only inside these catacombs, whatever, because for whatever reason, this is where it's better for them to live, and this is why we didn't see them in any other place in the planet.
Sure, everything is kind of locally adapted to whatever environment suits them, I suppose, right? But what you would expect to see if the scenario actually plays out over longer times is that very quickly, there's going to be this kind of gold rush, right? So the people are going to move into all these different planets and colonize them, and then they're going to become even more different. So you would expect languages to diverge. You would expect people to also become sort of morphologically different, which we kind of already see with the Belters being taller and all that.
Yeah,
but probably
then they will go back to being regular size. Don't want to offend any Belter.
Well, I guess it depends on what the intensity of the gravitational pull is on these different planets. But they're all going to be locally adapted to all these different environments, and therefore become more different from one another. And in very short order also. right? So,
and how about the things that eat their eye, whatever the cells in their eyes? That's new fertile ground that the humans bring, and then stuff that's already living there in the planet are like, hey, salt water in your eye, boom. That's a great way for me. Yeah.
Exactly. Like they also introduced their own new environments to the organisms on that planet. So all of a sudden, there's a whole new niche that you could evolve into, and start feeding off eyeballs.
Yeah, right? And that's like a minuscule example. I bet that if humans go and try to colonize a planet that's whatever a gazillion of kilometers away, just like every single thing in this environment, every single microbe would just, I don't know. It's like, for example, so here in the Mediterranean, we opened also a portal, a ring, the Suez Canal, and then a few years ago, it was dug a little bit deeper. So now you have a new strain of jellyfish that can come over, and it's taking over the Mediterranean. It's coming from the Red Sea, and now every summer you have like a month that you have these very, very dangerous jellyfish that just basically killing everything in its path. You can't stop it because no organism in the Mediterranean is equipped to deal with this kind of predator because they never seen this kind of predator. So it seems like I don't know. Every little change has so many unforeseen circumstances. Maybe that was why also they added the slugs, just not to have just the eyeballs part. Okay, there's like one problem. Just maybe to symbolize that when you colonize a new planet, a new environment, you can't foresee the millions of problems that you're gonna have.
Sure, yeah. Whenever you connect these different worlds with different life forms, just like a Suez Canal or other like land bridges all of a sudden being formed, or people connecting different worlds, all sorts of unforeseen consequences can occur. But there is a little bit of a weakness. I've already complained about the slugs, but here, let's do it some more. So they say, well, the slugs have a neurotoxin, right? So, okay. So wait,
what does that mean? Neurotoxins, like a poison?
So it's a poison that at least somehow interferes with the signaling in your nervous system. So it could be in your brain or just elsewhere in your body,
or in your virtue also, like your virtue signaling.
Also, okay, sure,
whatever.
Yeah. And that exists, of course, right? So there are species that produce neurotoxins, like No, so for example, these tree frogs that are very brightly colored, and they have on their skin, they have these neurotoxins, which are so deadly that it's very useful to use that as on the tip of your arrow when you go hunting in the forest, But they have evolved these toxins as a defense mechanism against organisms that have a particular type of nervous system, right? So they produce these toxins to actually interfere with the signaling in the nervous system. On a planet where there is no vertebrates with not any kind of synapses in the way that we have them, why would these slugs produce these neurotoxins? Well, maybe just coincidentally, but usually these things are quite complex molecules. Like, why would they just carry them around if there's nothing to defend against, right?
Right. It's like an arms race, right? All the poisons and stuff that poisonous animals and whatever microbes and stuff that they develop.
Yeah. I mean, these are like very specific molecules that then interfere with specific sort of lock and key systems in our nervous system, so that it shuts down, and then you can't move anymore or breathe or whatever, and you're toast, right? But that's as the result of some co-evolutionary process, in a way, like some sort of arms race.
And you want to connect maybe all that, like, okay, so the maladies and the sicknesses that they develop there to Europeans coming to the New World and infecting the local population. Here it's because maybe there's some local population. It depends how you view it. They're also new, but maybe a little bit to talk about the analogies that you can make from this season to all the natives, like 90%, right, of the native populations in America being wiped out by sickness and stuff that they weren't prepared for, because they had never known anything like
exactly.
it.
It's basically the same story as the jellyfish, right? Some new thing is introduced, and in this case it's infectious diseases or pathogens, which the Europeans had over time evolved some immunity to, and the people in New World had not. So this was
they were just
very
lazy.
deadly to them. Well, it's because they didn't have the same cattle, actually the same animals. So a lot of these diseases jump between mammal species, or actually also birds. And so because there had been a lot more husbandry in the old world than the new world, there had been more of these diseases, and then introducing them in the new world was actually very deadly for the people who lived there.
Half our population is unemployed, and we've been given the biggest opportunity to give them jobs, to give them a purpose in a century. Every week, another colony ship filled with our constituents shows up at the blockade, and we make them wait. They're sitting ducks for pirates.
This is just like the first expedition to this new planet, but now since Gao, I think is her name, Avasarala's opponent, she won the elections, and she's like no, there's no obstacles, no embargo on immigrating everywhere. And this goes to a point that you raised. Maybe we can also elaborate on that in a different video about the push and the pull factors regarding immigration.
Your faith in my vision, in our shared vision, is going to change the arc of our species. I intend to dedicate my first term to fully opening the ring gates for exploration and for colonization.
Now, just like it's gonna be millions of people immigrating from Earth, Mars, and the belt to the 1300 planets over there. That will be. You mentioned in a past video about the Expanse how the discovery of the new world, that was like the most important event in human history, from a political, historical, cultural, and scientific evolutionary perspective. But this would just like be 1300 times that, to all these different habitats with different climates, with different biospheres, and it's just impossible to imagine how that, what kind of universe that would create. Maybe like a Star Trek universe, you would travel to that place a million years later and just have Klingons.
Right, exactly. You would see much greater diversity than you see now on a single planet. You would get really different hominids, you would expect, right? Just because of the different environments and the distances.
Maybe give an example or two from Earth, how similar species diversified once, whatever, I don't know, Asia and America, the land bridge was no longer there, or Australia, whatever, separated itself from the other continents.
Well, if there's these large barriers, then you just end up with really different species assemblages. Like in Australia, I guess there's still way more marsupials than anywhere else, right?
You told me about the marsupial wolf.
Right. Yeah. The mammals that occurred there originally, or before humans started showing up, are marsupials, and basically all the mammals elsewhere. Not entirely, but most of them are placental, which is kind of obviously different.
Yeah.
So for example, in the case of Hawaii, where these different islands appeared as if portals opening up, in a very short time, this whole group of plants radiated, diversified into all these different forms from a single common ancestor. And so quickly that we can't even really reconstruct in what order that happened. There was just kind of this explosion of different forms. known as the Hawaiian silver swords, which is like one of the sort of textbook examples of this process. Like in really short order, they took on different forms just to exploit all the different opportunities that are provided by completely new, empty, fertile islands with mountain ranges and all the rest.
Yeah, and we can imagine, well, let's say that they didn't have the cure to this blinding disease thing eating in their eyes, and they managed to survive. A few thousand or tens of thousands years later, the humans there, they can't see, but they have different senses to walk around and survive, because basically it's a trial and error evolution, right? You have something that is a little bit different, and then if it helps you survive, it sticks. You pass it on, and then it becomes more and more accentuated over time.
They might become bats. They might. Right.
You want to talk about the bats, or is that for a different video? Because
no,
you had a cool example with the bats.
Yeah. So well, in this case, the blindness, and then the bats, of course, have ultrasonic, sonar, I guess, to detect insects. But the real thing that is kind of the better analogy in relation to bats is that once in a while in evolution, something happens that we call a key innovation. So some new adaptation happened, and some new environment is opened up. And for the bats, for example, they started out as just like mice or rats, or and then they came up with flying. Well, flying is useful. Then this whole new environment opens up, the air, and there's a lot of different opportunity. And sure enough, there's actually very, very many bat species because they diversified into that opportunity that was provided by this whole new environment. And so that is another example of this rapid diversification thanks to new opportunity, and sort of, the new opportunity can just present itself because an island appears, or the opportunity can or the opportunity can be kind of created because all of a sudden you got this new skill, and there you go.
Right.
You're off to the races.
Right. Okay, that's awesome. And so this is just our first Science and Expanse videos. What do we want to talk about in our future the Expanse conversations regarding science?
We can talk about habitability and how it would work, for other planets to be habitable and for them to support life, and what that might look like, and how that might evolve, and at what rate, and what you would expect to see on a different world like that.
Okay, so Rutger, that was very, very cool. We're looking forward to the next videos, and thank you everybody for tuning in. If this is the first time that you're tuning in to one of our the Expanse videos, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell not to miss any of our future videos about that. If you're catching this on our podcast, again, follow our podcast, share with your friends, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.